SHS podcast, where we bring on inspiring guests to talk about their experience and we educate business owners and leaders. Sonja, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me today, Steve. Pleasure to be with you.
It's our pleasure. Well, Sonja, you are basically the owner of Bridge Performance Coaching. You specialize in coach recruiting. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what exactly is coach recruiting?
Yes, for sure. So I have been in business with Bridge Performance Coaching we just hit our 5-year mark in December. And coach recruiting, to give you the boiled down version, is basically a combination of strategic staff-based coaching paired with targeted recruiting. So the focus is best person equals best performance equals best results. We're looking at hiring to fit within the culture and to fill the performance gaps within small businesses.
Well, I think, all CEOs have made hiring mistakes. So it's extremely valuable to be able to really find the right person for the right fit. That just helps the company succeed. So really appreciate you taking the time to give us a little bit of insight here as to the 5 hiring musts. And I'd love to get right into that. So what would you say are the most important things for business owners or CEOs or HR individuals to focus on when hiring staff?
Sure. Well, I like to break it down into 5 tips, Steve. So my first tip would be know your center culture, your business culture. That is the most important thing. And when we think about culture, we're thinking about several components to that. We're thinking about vision, mission, core values, and then organizational structure. And I'll just elaborate a little bit on the core values piece of things, because that really should define, your core values should define who you're looking for that would be a solid fit within your culture. If they don't fit within your cultures, then they're not going to be a long-term fit within your team, if that makes sense. And I do want to reference a book that I use a lot, a system rather. It's from a book called Traction, and the author is Gino Wickman. And it's based upon the entrepreneurial operating system. So there are a lot of great principles in that book that are guiding values for a business owner to look at. And if you need help with core values, it's a great place to look.
Well, I mean, core values definitely are one of the most important things, is understanding your culture, making sure that the folks that come in really are able to work well together and all drive, towards the mission of the company. Right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're in business for, is to really, everyone, of course, has their own agenda in business, but it's that culture and that environment that really helps a business succeed or ultimately ends up destroying a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So knowing that, as you said, there are 5 hiring musts, right? Musts. What are some of the other musts that folks should focus on? I'd love to redefine them as well, or get into them a little more so we understand more about each one as well.
Sure, absolutely. So the second one I would say is define who it is that you're looking for. The more you can drill down on painting a picture, basically, of who it is that you're looking for, from demographics to skill set to everything that you can, have a picture of this person in your mind. And again, going back to our tip number 1, the person needs to fit within your culture. So, I mean, it should be defined just as clearly as you possibly can get it defined. And the more clarity that you have up front with exactly who you're looking for, the best chance that you're going to find exactly the right person to round out your team. And another thing to keep in mind is you want to know the people that you already have on your team, know what their skill sets are, because ideally you're looking to fill performance gaps within your organization. So if you've got gaps that are glaring, really looking to find the person who fits that skill set, but also fits within the culture. My hiring process is a 2/3 top heavy soft skills model. So Skills can often be taught or trained or learned. However, the soft skills, and particularly the soft skills that are going to work well within your team and within your culture, is a whole other story.
So part of what you do is really evaluating the current culture.
Correct. When I start with a business owner, I look first of all under the hood, and what that means is I'm talking to the current team and I'm getting a sense from them what's working well, what are the areas that may need improvement, what is the current culture like, how would you define the core values? Because oftentimes what the business owner thinks is not in actuality what the people who are working there are finding to be true. And then I also get a sense of what it's like to work for that particular leadership. And so I'm collating all of that information and then talking with the business owner and making recommendations about, here are where I see the gaps on your team. Here are my recommendations for the best type of person to fill those gaps. And then I actually go and hire the person who's going to be the best fit all the way around.
Does it require a business owner that's open-minded, really? I mean, it seems like some of this is you're evaluating whether the culture they think they have is actually really the culture, as well as, you know, the individuals that this person hired or has hired over time, whether they really are, you know, the correct fit for the company as well.
It does. That's a great question, Steve. It does require an open-mindedness and a willingness to be open to evaluation, be open to input, be open to suggestions. I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm doing is making recommendations based upon the information that I've collected. But most business owners want to know what's working and what's not working within their organization, especially if they're going to spend the money to hire somebody new. Better to know what's not working before you bring somebody new into a broken situation. Better to address the issues up front and take care of those before you bring somebody new onto the team and create bad habits in a new person.
So is this something that you would recommend for a business owner hiring entry level, or is this coach recruiting really designed more for, you know, managerial and C-level positions where you really need somebody who's going to play nice in the sandbox, for lack of a better word?
I've hired for all levels of positions, and I think it really matters what is most needed to fill the performance gaps within an organization. If you're a print company, for example, and you don't have somebody doing a great job back in your production area, then it's going to hold up everything else. It doesn't matter what an amazing outside salesperson or customer service representative you have. If you don't have the back end working properly, then you're not going to be able to meet the needs and deliver on the promises that you've made to clients.
So, you know, as a business owner, then, I mean, you know, I have to be willing to take a step back and say, where are my gaps, right? And how do I basically make my company better? So I guess from an interviewer's perspective, right, or an owner's perspective, it's really about having somebody, an outsider, who can evaluate and help make my company better and help me find the right person for the position.
Yes, and that actually leads us perfectly into tip number 3, and that is being strategic. You know, as you just said, we as small business owners oftentimes get bogged down in the details, if you will. It's easy to get stuck working in the business and forget about the importance of stepping back and working on the business and having that big picture and reevaluating, okay, are we really fulfilling the vision and the mission that we've set forth? Are we reiterating the core values? Are we hiring and firing according to the core values? And so, you know, really reevaluating from a strategic standpoint, who it is that you have on your team on a regular basis. Because, I mean, we can take 2020 as an example of ways that employees maybe could have been the right fit for the team at the beginning of the year versus all the changes that 2020 brought, the ways that businesses had to pivot and shift, and at the end of 2020 might not be the right fit. The perfect team member at the beginning of 2020 may not have been the perfect fit at the end of 2020. So that constant reevaluation of who you have and who you need to be looking next to bring on board.
Well, saying that, it's extremely important then that I, as a business owner, decide to not just post something on a local listserv and, kind of decide when the person comes in whether I like them or not. So what is your hiring process? What is the hiring process, right? When we go through you guys?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that is my tip number 4, that whatever you do, whether you work with Coach Recruiting, Bridge Performance Coaching, or you do it yourself, or you work with another recruiter, it is extremely important. I'm a stickler about having a tried and true process. And the reason I feel like that's important is because as you're making your final decision, especially as a small business owner that is inundated day to day with the ins and outs of doing business, you need to be able to compare apples to apples for your candidates when you're ready to make that decision. You need to know that you have asked the same questions, that you've checked the same number of references, you've asked the same questions of the references, that you've done some sort of a strengths evaluation, that you really have a good understanding of how this person is going to fit within your team, that perhaps you've even gotten input from other team members that the new person will be strategically interacting with. You want to know that you followed the same process. And the best way to do it is to have some other input in that process, because as small business owners, it's very difficult to always keep that big picture perspective. It's easy to get entrenched in the day-to-day and not be able to really step back and think holistically about the person that might really be the best fit moving forward.
Well, I often use the analogies that this is, our baby, right? And so we sometimes maybe don't want this person hanging around our baby or this person hanging around our baby. But what we really need to do is get a true assessment as to how all of our kids are doing, right? How our baby is doing in general, and then figure out how to best make that baby grow up properly, right? And being the best they can be. So it's like an objective person telling you sort of where the good, the bad, the ugly is, to be able to help you really go in the right direction. So then how do you make a final decision on a particular candidate? How do you do that? And then how do you recommend your knowledge, right, to business owners?
That's a great question. Well, as we talked about with the process, so by the time we've gotten to the place where we're ready to make a decision, I've spent a considerable amount of time with that candidate. I have talked to them for an initial interview, which I always do on Zoom, so I'm seeing the person from the get-go. Then we've spent time in an in-person interview where I've facilitated that interview with the business owner. I've been able to observe the dynamics between the candidate and the business owner, which is extremely important. We've integrated other members of the team, especially ones that will be working closely with that new person. We've done a strengths evaluation, and I've talked with several references. I try to talk with somebody who's been a supervisor to the person, somebody who's been a peer to the person, and if they've had any oversight or supervisory responsibilities, I talk to somebody that they've overseen in the past. So I collate all of that information and I make recommendations to the business owner based upon the culture. What I try to do first, though, is listen to what the business owner has observed, and then I make recommendations about who my top recommendation would be and what the reasons are for that.
Well, this has been unbelievably helpful and really informative. Sonja, I appreciate your time. You are the owner of Bridge Performance Coaching. You are the coach recruiting expert, and we really appreciate you spending some time with us and helping us understand what a true coach recruiter goes through. And hopefully you have educated, I know myself, but you have definitely educated some of our viewers on the importance of culture and finding a coach recruiter that is able to do that. So if anybody needs to get a hold of you, 301-661-2283, that's your telephone number. Thank you again so much for taking the time to educate us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
My pleasure.